Alright, welcome to the LEGO Skylines ranking or review video. A little bit of both. I have some plans for this video and I hope that it turns out alright, but in order to do that, we gotta get everything off of this table in order to start out with, well, one set at a time and stack them up and get them sorted so that we can actually rank them. And I think to rank them, I'm literally going to just draw on this good old slab of glass, and we're going to put the little squares for rankings, the S, A, B, C, D, or whatever, and we'll go from there, and I'll give you my overall ranking and review of each Skyline set so far. And, of course, that includes the good old Singapore set as well. Let's get all these off the table and get ready for a ranking. Here we go. Alright, and now you can see we have our ranking list. I may have probably edited this to something else in post, but if I thought it was okay, then it's still just my handwriting. But anyway, with that, let's get into the first set, and we're going to go by date. We're going to do this in order, because we're just putting them in the ranking list, and I figure what better to start with than the first and go to present day. And with that, I present the very first LEGO Skylines architecture set. This one is a little bit lackluster to me. I know it is the first one, so I might need to give it a little bit of a break, but at the same time, there are really not very many buildings. I don't even know if you can really count the little dudes as buildings, to be honest, but it's okay. It's not great. It's really probably one of the worst Skyline sets, and with that, I think we got to put it down on the D. It is very much not the best of the Skyline sets. The buildings are lackluster. There's not very many of them, and the ones that are there, they're just not that cool. I'm not gonna lie. They're really not as three-dimensional and such as some of the later dates, especially like this one. It's just a flat back, and most of the buildings nowadays, they don't do that anymore. So D tier for Venice. Sorry, Venice, you are a really cool city, but I'm sorry, the LEGO version of you does not give you or do you justice. So you gotta go down to the bottom. And now on to the next one. And next up, from the same year, you almost wouldn't think that Venice and Berlin were released in the same year, just because, well, Berlin does look quite a bit better, and again, there's even sort of a more three-dimensionality to it. Especially with this building, I think that roof is quite cool. You probably can't really see in there very well, but the roof is really cool, and it looks really cool in real life, seeing all the like reflections coming off of all the translucent pieces in there. And the printed pieces are a nice little nod to some good history. So with that, I think this one, I'm sort of stuck between C and B right now, because while it is cool, it does have three-dimensionality, there are not very many buildings in this, but the printed pieces are pretty cool. So I think with the printed pieces, we have to put this in B tier. And I think that's fair for it. The buildings are pretty fun to build, and yeah, not the worst building experience. Oh, I also forgot to mention with Venice, this build experience is boring as be all. This is about as simple as a build as it gets when it comes to these architecture sets, and that is also why it definitely deserves the D tier I put it in. So, moving on from Berlin, let's get on to the next one, New York. Alright, and now New York. This one, it has really cool buildings. I mean, it is cool, but I really gotta say, New York has hundreds of buildings and a park, a really, really big, famous park that they didn't put in here. And I really think that it would have been nice even to just have Manhattan Park. Just that one addition to this could have really sold this and made it so much better. Just to give it some extra green or something. Because right now it's a little too simple, a little too lackluster, and yeah, it does have the three-dimensionality, and this Sears building, I think is what it's called. I might be wrong on that. But the bigger building in New York is fun to build, and it's not the most creative of buildings, but it is fun to build, so I'll give it that. And after giving it some thought, I think New York really needs to go into the C section. It's really not quite as good as Berlin and just the quality of the buildings, and I think they could have really done more to make this just an extra special thing, and they didn't go above and beyond like they did in some other cities. And with that, let's get on to the next one, Sydney. Alright, P. Sherman, Wallaby Way. Wait, P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. Here we come. Sydney. This one's actually not bad. I enjoy the really big bridge. This is an abnormally long and big bridge for the Skyline sets. I do enjoy that, and I think they did an okay job with the amphitheater. Though not the best looking thing, I think it works from a distance. And overall, still nothing to go home and praise too hard. And honestly, I can't say that this is really any better than New York. They just kind of include the stuff that's really big in there, and that's about it. There's nothing more to it. It's just these 5 buildings, and that's it. Yeah, so, well, no, not even 5, 4. Just these 4 buildings, and that's about it. So I think even though the build is really cool, this one probably deserves to go about where Berlin is. B tier. I think it's a tiny bit better than New York, and I think it, because of the bridge and the extra effort in terms of some other details and just the more fun building experience, it probably deserves to go in the B tier. And with that, let's get on to ranking the next Skyline set, Chicago. So, moving up in a year along with Sydney, I almost forgot to mention, these are all from 2016. Now we're on to 2017 with these two, and the next one. And I don't know, I think 2017 did a little bit better. I think the being able to move this bridge is really cool, but it's, again, kind of awkward that, you know, this bridge is this big, and then Sydney's bridge is like half of the structure, whereas, yeah, that bridge is like a tenth of the structure. I mean the overall build. And with that, I think Chicago is actually probably also a B tier, just because it has a little bit more interesting building techniques, and I gotta say, I do like the red building. Really nice they included that one. But I can't say that Chicago is any better than the B tier again, just because, again, it's a really big city, and I feel like there's more that they could have added. There's probably an iconic park. There's probably some other iconic buildings. And I just feel like they slacked a little bit on this, is all. And I think that's sort of the vibe of some of the earlier sets, is that slacking in buildings where they could have just added a little bit more and added just one more building or one more little green thing. I don't know. But I don't know Chicago well enough to know exactly what buildings they could have added or what park or whatever they could have added, but I'm sure, just along with New York, that there is something that they could have added. And with that, I gotta say, the only reason this is going into B tier is because it has a quote-unquote action feature with the movable drawbridge, and I think that's pretty cool, so it's got to go into B tier just for that. So we're going into B tier, and I think just because of the movable feature, it's actually going to go above Sydney. Though it doesn't have any printed pieces, so it can't go above Berlin. That just has way too many cool printed pieces for that to be above that. So, current ranking. Let's get on to the next one, London. And on to London, the last one and most certainly the best one from 2017. I think this one just definitely trumps both Sydney and Chicago. There's no way that this goes below those, and I think this is probably the first one that's going to go up in the A or maybe even S. I'm not sure yet, but let's go through it. So this one in particular both has, the action drawbridge, and the bridge is big. And that is good because this is a real Lego set that you can buy on a much bigger scale, and I think it's really cool that they sort of represented it pretty accurately on this small scale. It's got a printed piece, and it's just got really cool three-dimensionality. And with both, or really all of the things that I just mentioned, it really can't go much lower than A. It is a solid build and a solid thing to make. I would definitely recommend this. The Ferris wheel is a little bit tedious to make, but honestly, if you just kind of take your time and space them out right, it's really not that bad. And it does kind of wobble around a little bit more than I think it should. I think they could have made it so that it was a little more sturdy, but really it's not meant to be played with too much. And again, with the action feature, the drawbridge, and the cute little boat, I think this is a solid A tier. And I may change my mind later on in this video and move it up, but we'll see. For now, it's going in A. And let's move on to the next year of sets, and the next set, Shanghai. And before I even grab it, you might be saying, but wait, there's a Las Vegas set that came out before that, and I don't have that one specifically. I have the one that came out after to correct the Las Vegas set, and with that, I'm going to start with Shanghai and then go to Las Vegas because I technically have them in that order, but I understand that there is an alternate version of Las Vegas, so I do want to point that out and just make a note of it, and I will make more of a note of it when we get to Las Vegas, but for now, let's go to Shanghai. Alright, and now Shanghai. Let me put this a little bit further over just so I can hopefully lay it out so you can see it. This is I noticed that this is going to get a little bit crowded as we go, and I'm going to try to move these down to the bottom of their things so that I can get a little bit more room above, hopefully. And then, yeah, now we can move this back a little bit. So, Shanghai. Shanghai is definitely one of the cooler ones, just overall. I'm going to go ahead and just count the buildings really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 different buildings that they have represented in this Skyline set. And let me just... So, not including London, comparing it to all these other ones, there are maybe 5 or 6 different buildings at the most. And some of these only have... New York only maybe has 4 relevant ones, and then a tiny Statue of Liberty, so kind of 5, so 4.5-ish. Venice has 1, 2, 3, 4, and again a half-ish with these 2 pillars. And then Sydney, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it. Chicago, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's it. Berlin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's it. And with that, I think just alone with that, it has to go into A tier, just representing so many different buildings. And then when we get into the building experience, and that is just a whole different thing on its own again, because with all of these other ones, there is nothing quite on the level, at least that had been released to this date, that is on the level of this one. Shanghai, this... I'll have to look up the name of this building and show it on screen because I don't remember it right now, but this gray building, so cool. What a technique. That is a Lego technique I have definitely never seen, and I probably will never see again in any other kind of build because this is just such a unique thing. And it's really actually really strong. As you can see, I'm holding this at a 90-degree angle, and this building, while it is a little floppy, it's holding up. It's solid. There's a 3-pronged building they did a really good job at, and it's very 3-dimensional. So just all of those things, this is just a Very solid build, very solid look, very solid number of buildings, solid all around. I don't think I could put this lower than S tier. This is the first S tier, and it deserves it 100%. I would recommend this one over most of the other sets. It's one of my favorite ones. I might be a little bit biased, but it's also just got a really cool building technique and stuff going on with this and the blue building. Both of these buildings are really fun. And yeah, this is just really representative of Shanghai and really fun to build. So definitely S tier. Let's put her there. And now on to Las Vegas. I know this one has an alternate build, and I'll discuss that briefly before we get on to the main build. Here we go. Alright, and now moving on to Las Vegas. Oh, Las Vegas. So, this one, I gotta say, I gotta start off with, obviously, this has an alternate, well, I guess an alternate build that was canceled, that had the gold Mandalay Bay, and they switched it for, I guess, the Bellagio, and understandably, it had, you know, a very tragic thing going on there. I'm just realizing that this is not connected there. There we go. So, understandable and reasonable, so not going to really complain about that too much. Just really going to talk about the set and address that it has an alternate version. The pillars in the back of the Bellagio are a little awkward, just because they don't have to be in the front, but I guess maybe there are pillars like that. I don't know, I've never actually seen it in real life, but regardless, the rest of this set is really cool. The three-pronged building looks a lot like the Needle in Seattle, I gotta say, but it is still a really cool building, and those buildings are just cool in general, so gotta hand it to it. It's a cool building, why not make it? And the Sphinx, that's a cool addition. Very nice thing. Printed Las Vegas sign. Gotta give it that. And the little tunnel part there is actually kind of cool. I like that it's actually a little tunnel. You can actually sort of see that it goes under it there. And that's a sort of an interesting addition. And again, three-dimensionality. Really cool. But with that, this is not the most exciting of builds. It's kind of simple, other than the really tall tower. That one's kind of exciting to make and really fun to make. The rest of this is kind of generic. The pyramid is a little bit fun, but it would have been cooler if this was a full pyramid. That would have been really interesting to see. But they didn't do that, which is weird. And with the sort of three-dimensionality, but then the lack thereof, I can't put this any higher than A. I'm not sure if I want to put it in A tier. It's definitely pretty good, but I think that lack of three-dimensionality, there's not really much to play with. There's sort of just, it's overall okay. It's not bad, it's not good, but it's okay. And I think with that, I'm not sure that I can put it any higher than Berlin, because I don't think it goes higher than Berlin. I think it goes with Berlin, and we'll go ahead and move that up a little bit, and we'll just, yeah, there we go. And those are both now in B tier, and I think that works out just fine. Let's get on to the next one, San Francisco. Okay, and moving on, both in years and in sets. And now this one, moving on to 2019 from the 2018 sets, which are generally pretty stacked together, actually. I'm now realizing that all these sets pretty much progress as they go in years, and I'm only literally realizing that as I'm making this video. But with that, let's get on to San Francisco. So this one, I gotta say, the building technique for this chunk of land in here, and having even just little cars, you probably can't even see them. This one deserves a little bit of a focus. Those little cars in the road sloped up, that is so cool and such a unique little building experience. Really cool building techniques in this one, gotta say, definitely cool. And that alone makes this at least a B tier, just on the building techniques. And then moving on, you gotta put it up again because there are just so many different buildings and things that are represented in this in such a good way. And one of those things, big bridges. I like big bridges. I think if I had to choose having a big bridge over a little bridge, any old day, big bridge. And I can't overlook the printed pieces, the abundance of them, and just the different uses of sort of the same printed pieces in different ways is really cool. So with that, I am hesitant to put this in S tier, and I almost think it might deserve it, and I'm trying to think of a reason it doesn't deserve it, and I think it really does deserve an S tier. This just it has a lot of really cool details, really good building experience, just everything about it comes together, and it's a lot of really cool pieces to make really cool techniques. I think this one, San Francisco, is an S tier. S tier build for sure. Let's put you down there and cement that one. On to the next. Let's get to Paris. Paris. Here we go. Alright, and now moving on to Paris. This one is pretty cool. I think this one is definitely on par with London, if not also San Francisco. Maybe not quite on par with Shanghai, quite, but it is a good one. So, let's go through this. Printed pieces. A lot of printed pieces, and these printed arch pieces for the Eiffel Tower, very cool. And the fact that there is a miniature Eiffel Tower and it's three-dimensional in all directions is very cool. And again, gotta hand it to three-dimensionality. I think I forgot to mention the three-dimensionality in San Francisco, but that one's also pretty solid. And this one is also very solid. Even the building that they didn't need to add three-dimensionality to, this, I'll pretend like I knew the name of it by putting it on the screen now, but this building is also three-dimensional. As this one on the far end here, a little less on the back, has a little bit of the flatness, but I think just having that one building that is flat, and that's probably maybe even what it looks like in real life, who knows? I actually don't know. But having the one is acceptable, I think. And this, having that little flame in there, that's really cool. That is definitely a good addition, and overall, good build. I think this definitely goes in A, and I'm hesitant to put this in S because really the building techniques is awesome. Building the Eiffel Tower, pretty cool, pretty fun, and it's hard to not put this also in S tier. And I think for now, I'm going to stack it in S tier alongside San Francisco. So these are both in S tier. I'm actually going to move. So these are both in S tier. And moving on to Tokyo. This one I like. You'll see why. Let's grab it. So again, moving up in years and in sets. There was not too many sets from 2019, but they did stack up together and they did do well. So let's see how 2020 does. This is Tokyo. This one is honestly, again, one of my favorites. I'll admit that I'm a little bit biased about it, but at the same time, there's a reason for it. Let's go over that. So to start with, there are a lot of buildings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I'm going to count the mountain in the background as a building because that is an aesthetic part of it. And then so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll count all of this street as one building, even though technically it is a combination of a bunch of different buildings. We'll just count it as one, just to be fair. So 6, and then 7, and 8. So we got 8 buildings. Again, stacking up with Shanghai in that regard, and definitely stacking up with Shanghai in the building techniques and just the overall build. The tower, really fun to build. Not quite as fun as the Eiffel Tower, but the radio tower in Tokyo is still really cool, and I think building everything else is also cool, and it is also really cool. I don't think you'll be able to see it too well. Yeah, there we go. You can see there's like a little gap in the mountain there, and That is so cool. I don't know why that's so cool, but it works, and it looks really aesthetic and really pleasing, especially when you're looking at it like on a wall or something. And I don't know why that's grown on me so much, and it's such like an interesting feature, but I don't know why, but it works. And building the other two buildings, solid stuff. So, I've gone off on a rant on this for long enough. Let's put it in its place. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, there's also a bunch of trees. I love cherry blossoms. I can't not put this any lower. So we got to scoot those over, and we're putting it right up in S tier with Shanghai. But I will admit, I don't think it's better than Shanghai, and that is literally just because of this bigger building in the back here, and I enjoyed building this so much that I just can't quite put Tokyo in front of Shanghai, but they're both S tier for sure. And maybe you have your own opinions on these. If you do, actually, leave your comments below. I'm glad to hear if you guys have different rankings. Let's get on to the last two sets, and the last one from 2020. And as you may have noticed, the number of sets has been shrinking as we go on in years, so I honestly don't expect us to see a lot of these sets in the future, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't think that LEGO will be continuing this line of architecture sets for too much longer, especially with world events that happen to go on. There's nothing that LEGO could do about that, and it happens to go against their policies, so I don't see this set, or this line of sets, going on for too long. Let's get on with the next one, Dubai. Alright, and moving on to the next set, also from 2020, which kind of gives me hope that they may just release two sets in 2022, even though they didn't release any Skyline sets in 2021. It gives me hope they might release two Skyline sets, but at the same time, the numbers have been dwindling, and we'll see. But with that, Dubai. This one is hard to overlook, especially with the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, and it is really cool, I gotta say, that they made the Burj Khalifa the tallest building amongst the Skyline sets. So if you were to actually just, set this down and look at all of these different sets, that's not where I'm ranking it. If you were to set it down and look at all of the different sets, and it would actually look like, well, pretty accurate in terms of height and such to the other sets. And I'll show a quick little video and such showing that off with its current placement. But yeah, this is definitely one of the cooler sets to build. It's definitely very repetitive to build the tallest building, but at the same time it's not, because it gets skinnier as it goes up. And I gotta say, the two buildings on the far sides are some of the cooler building techniques that I have ever seen when it comes to these Skyline sets. They do sort of stack up to the building that I keep raving about over on the Shanghai set, but at the same time they're not quite on the level of that, but the building techniques for these buildings are definitely really cool. And I can't overlook the three-dimensionality again. So much three-dimensionality. Could look at this from either way, doesn't matter which way you put it, just happens to be that the is on this side. But if you were to flip it over and put it on the wall this way, it wouldn't really make much of a difference, if I'm being honest. So maybe I need to take that into account when I'm setting up my my Skylines display coming up here in the next video, actually. Hint, hint. Shameless promotion towards that. So, with that, thinking about it, I am hesitant to put this in A tier, but I'm also hesitant to put it in S tier because I've been giving all kinds of stuff S tier right now, and I really don't know that I'm going to keep both of these sets in S tier if I'm going to put this in S tier too. I think when it comes to comparing every set, these two are actually more on par, with each other. So Dubai and Paris are probably more on par with each other in terms of stacking than good old San Francisco, because San Francisco, this chunk on this side here is just one of the coolest and most unique building things that I've seen, except for, again, good old Tokyo over there. So I gotta say, even though these are all S tier over here, this stacks more. So San Francisco definitely, in my opinion, stacks more with Tokyo. So we'll go ahead and stack those two together. You're probably not going to be able to see too much of Tokyo anymore, but I'm trying to keep them all in the actual S tier range there. But yeah, I'll try to adjust it so you can see it better here in just a second. Alright, so hopefully that's a little bit better adjusted. So, moving on to the last one from the year that I am recording this, 2022. Let's go on to Singapore. Alright, and now Singapore. So, this one definitely deserves its own special spot. Whoops. Let's fix that right quick. There we go. This one definitely deserves its own special spot. This one also has really cool building techniques, just with this main 3 building chunk. Very interesting technique to make it have that curve and such. This is definitely one of the thicker ones. I think Paris is also one of the thicker ones. Let's just compare those real quick, side by side, in terms of thickness. I think Paris still has it in terms of being a little bit longer on the back end, but Singapore is definitely not slacking on the back end. And with that, it isn't slacking on the back end because, again, 3-dimensionality, everything in the back is actually how it should look, and it's looking good. Though I will say some of these holes on the back of this building are a little bit awkward, which is fine. And again, you're really not going to look at this too much probably, so it's acceptable. And moving on to the next big thing, which is the number of buildings, which I keep raving about. And we'll just count them real quick. So 1 for the big 3 trunk, 2 for all of these purpley green special trees. I'll count them all as 1. And then, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the tall, 6, 7, 8. 8 buildings. I think that should be the standard from here on out. I won't lie. And just for the 8 buildings, it's got to go at least in A tier. I can't put it any lower just for that aspect. But with that, there's also another thing I want to talk about, and that's all the printed pieces. There are so many printed pieces in this one. All of these ones along this side and the other side of this building are all printed. All of these in the front, all of these little 1x1s are printed, all of the little house 1x1s are printed, all of these on this building are printed. There are so many printed pieces on this. I'll admit there are a lot of repetition in those printed pieces, but they're printed pieces and there are no stickers. So in that regard, can't complain. They're printed pieces. So even if they're repetition, they're cool because they make sense, they go where they're needed, and I think they work well. And so with printed pieces, building techniques, and the number of buildings being really good, I think we got to put this in S tier. And honestly speaking, I think this one goes alongside good old Shanghai, because these 3 buildings here and some of the buildings techniques that come along with that, including the other 2 tall buildings, really fun to build, gotta say. So including all that and all the thoughts on that, I think it stacks up alongside Shanghai in the S tier. It's probably not going to look like it's actually in the S tier anymore, but that's okay. And now everything is placed. Let's see if we can rearrange some stuff and sort of rank everything from first to worst, as it were. So let's get on to officially ranking from first to worst. I'm sure I can do this pretty easily now, so I'll do that let's get on with the official ranking from Mr. HiYodaPanda on the LEGO Skyline sets so far as of 2022. Let's do this. Here we go. Alright, now on to the ranking, and to start things off with the bottom, gotta go from bottom to top, Venice. And just to clarify things, there is no F tier, and that's for a reason. It's because I don't think that any of these sets are actually horrible. I think these are actually better than I could ever do, because I'm not a LEGO designer, and nobody deserves an F. And I think this one, although it was the first one, it's still not the best one. I can't give it too much slack just because it was the first one. And I gotta say, the printed piece is really cool, but the other printed piece is very easy to come by, so I'm not gonna give it too much credit for that. With that, I think Venice is a solid build. It's better than I could do, that's for sure. Still, not the best of them, probably the worst of the LEGO architecture Skyline sets, though it is arguably a little bit easier to place on a wall just because it's so thin and uniform. Number 13 of 13, let's get on to 12 of 13, which I'm sure you can predict based on the rankings so far, New York. Whilst New York is a really cool place, the architecture Skyline set, it gets a couple of the really cool buildings, but it doesn't really get all of New York. I just think they could have put more in it. With that said, this is the next one. This is 12 out of 13. Let's get to 11. And moving on to number 11, I think it's pretty easy to predict what's going to be what here at this point, probably. But obviously, 11 out of 11. Or 11 out of 13, Sydney. It's actually a little bit hard for me to rank between Sydney and Chicago. I think these are actually really on par. If I really had to choose one over the other, Chicago is definitely over Sydney. So Sydney, 11. Whoops. Sydney is 11, and Chicago, 10. And moving on to the last of the C tier. So, for having the really cool printed pieces with the bigger buildings, there are some really cool building techniques. So building techniques and printed pieces, this one definitely is the top of C tier, but with that, it still deserves 9. 9 out of 13. Now moving on to up into B tier, and I was hesitant to put this in B tier because it's close to being A tier, but with that flat pyramid back, it just doesn't have the three-dimensionality that some of the other sets have, and if I wanted to, I could not put this set backwards. It doesn't have it with both the pyramid and those pillar pieces. It doesn't really work out as well. So it's got to stay in B tier, and it definitely has to stay below London. With that, this is a solid 8 out of 13. And moving on, I'm sure you know what's next, going to London. So, moving on from this one, it's actually going to be a little bit harder for me to rank some of these others because all of the ones in S tier are kind of stacked together. So these two, so Paris and Dubai are stacked together, these two are stacked together, and these two are stacked together. So for all of these, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to rank them, but to start things out, we'll go ahead. This is the official ranking for London. It's got the three-dimensionality, it's got the functionality, it's got the looks, it's got it all, but not quite everything. It could have a little bit more, let's be honest. Could have a couple more buildings maybe, but it does have the most iconic buildings and some of the cooler buildings, so you gotta give it that. And with that, that leaves it at number 7. And now, moving on. So, let me scoot these back up. These two are going to have a bit of a battle here because I don't know which one of these I really like better. these are going to be some hard ones to rank for me. I think if I absolutely have to put one above the other, I think Paris takes the cake over Dubai. And for me, that is literally just because of the Eiffel Tower. So I did brag a lot about the building techniques for Dubai, but at the same time, I mean, these are basically just on turntables, if I remember right. Oh, yeah. So these are basically just on some pins, and that's about it. So after thinking about it for a little bit, I've come to a conclusion, and I think Paris has to go above Dubai. So Dubai, and I'm going to explain my logic here, Dubai only actually has 4 different buildings. And while those buildings are... That was my dog. I promise. That's my dog. What? Okay. So, let me explain. Dubai has basically only 4 different buildings, and I think I've overlooked that. While they are really, really cool buildings and they have some really cool techniques within them, it's nothing crazy. There's no techniques in here that are absurd to me. It's really just the techniques to plug the buildings into the platform that are more interesting than actually the techniques to build the buildings are. Whereas when it comes to Paris, there are a lot more buildings. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings, and both the techniques and the way of putting the buildings onto the structure, well, really the bigger buildings is what I'm talking about. So the black one and the Eiffel Tower are definitely a little bit more complicated and a little bit cooler, a little bit more exciting to put on to the platform. So I think with that, both of those things put together, I have to give the award to Paris. So I may regret this, but if you have a different opinion about it and you're willing to share it, about any of these, by the way, do let me know. It's just my opinion. Let me know if you have a different one. I have to put Dubai personally lower than Paris. So Dubai, you're number 6. Let's take you out. Because I just obviously ranked this as the next one, this is number 5, and I think it deserves that. So there are technically more printed pieces in Paris as well than Dubai, unless you count the gold pieces, or unless you count that gold doorway as a printed piece in Dubai, which I don't really. There are basically none in Dubai. So this definitely has more, and I think those printed pieces for the arches are really cool. Can't overlook that again. So solid number 5 for me, personally. Moving on to the next 2. This is again going to be another fun versus battle. Here we go. Alright, and now moving on to the versus battle again for 2 really cool sets. So this one is a little bit interesting for me because there are really cool building techniques in both. There are a lot of buildings and a lot of cool buildings in both, but I think this one comes down to looks for me because everything else I just discussed is basically even. So when it really comes down to it, I think I have to go with looks because these are clearly on par in most of the ways except for the vibrancy. And when it comes down to it, I really have to give the looks to Tokyo. I think overall, just taking it in, and I'll give you a better look there. If I really have to get down to it, and it might be a little harder to see in person, but I think Tokyo looks better, and there's just a lot more cool pieces, and yeah, I mean, I can't overlook these really cool printed pieces on this curved building here. Those are awesome. The tower and the mountain in the background. I think the mountain in the background is a nice touch, and I think that puts it above San Francisco. Though, I gotta say, San Francisco being at number 4, still a pretty solid spot for it. It deserves it. It could probably switch between 4 and 3 pretty easily for me, but it's definitely not going above 3 for me regardless. So with that, let's get on to the next one, which I'm sure you already know, since I already basically ranked both of these. This is for Tokyo 3. Let's get on to the next two. This is going to be a little less controversial of a versus battle for me anyway, but here we go. Alright, and now the last of the versus battle. And I said this was going to be a less controversial thing. The reason for that is, again, just because of this is such a cool building technique. I can't get over it. It's just one of the most interesting things that I've seen LEGO do pretty much ever in any set. And that's saying something, because this is just one of those techniques that's just like, oh, well, how did they do that? And then you look at it and you're like, wait, they did that? That's how wait, what? And it's still really cool when you see it. It's like a how did they do that? And then when you see it, you're still like, how did they do that? And it's really, really awesome. So, even though this Singapore set has so many cool printed pieces and a arguably really cool building technique for a lot of the buildings, I can't, in reasonable conscience, put it above Shanghai, personally. And I could see some people wanting to put this above Shanghai, but if you've built both of them and you've actually seen this spiral building being built and built it yourself, you might think differently. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But this one is going to be number 2, and Shanghai is going to be number 1. So let's clean everything up, get everything back on the table, and I will just give some last overall thoughts on all of the sets together. Alright, and now to give my last overall thoughts of these. So overall, what do I think of these sets, and really just this theme in general within architecture, the Skylines theme of architecture sets? So overall, I think these are actually really cool, and I think they have definitely gotten better as they've gone along, and that really is shown just in terms of the years. Most of the earlier years did not rank so well, at least in my opinion, so I think I have ranked them well enough for me, and I would love to hear your guys' own rankings, because I'm always happy to hear what you guys think of it, because honestly, it's just my opinion, and I really want to know what you guys think of these sets as well, and maybe some of them rank differently for you, and I'd love to know why and where they go and how it's different for you, and maybe some of my opinions are wildly out there, but I'd still love to know if you think that and why you think that. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the video up here. Thank you all for watching. I am sure you know how the buttons work down there by now, so do click them as you please. Thank you all for watching. Mr. HiYodaPanda.